Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited to present our next presentation. We have Mark, and you've got the title right there, Democratic Confederalism as a Potential Governing Solution to the Ongoing Civil War in Burma, with the focus on Myanmar. Go for it, sir.
It's the same name, or it's different names for the same country.
Yeah.
They're just like political, like the Democratic ones support the term Burma and the junta supports Myanmar, I suppose. But thank you for the introduction.
Yeah.
So this will be my presentation. So for the background, chaos is approaching us all. As much as we wish for peace, it is clear to anyone that has been paying attention to recent geopolitical developments that the relative world peace maintained by the liberal democratic, rules-based Anglo-American hegemony is at its end. I do not announce this as a gleeful revolutionary proclamation, but rather as a somber and sober acknowledgement of the truth. A cursory glance at geopolitical developments of the 2020s will inform even a slightly perceptive observer that the world historical cycle is transitioning from one of harmony and symbiotic flourishing to one of discord, chaos, and conflict. History has shown that these cyclical oscillations are inevitable, that after crossing a certain point of no return, conflict cannot be outright avoided. In addition to this, given the scope and scale of incredibly devastating weapons, both conventional and nuclear, that humanity has at its disposal, it is imperative that we put serious effort into reforming our systems of governance so that we may better reduce the risk of small regional disputes and misunderstandings snowballing into total wars of planetary annihilation. This all begs the question: what supposed systems of governance can best neutralize these existential risks? Now, before I answer that, I'll just do a quick overview of the methodology. It was a mostly qualitative analysis using a primary source who's actually someone else presenting at the symposium today by the name of Mr. Yair Tet. And he was from Burma. He's actually been there. He was there for the protests. I ran this whole project by him, and he gave me a lot of valuable insight as well as historical knowledge. So big credit to him. Political theory: Abdullah Öcalan's Democratic Confederalism, John Dickinson's Articles of Confederation, which was the original Constitution to the United States before the Constitution, as well as the National Unity Government's Federal Democratic Charter. I'll be touching on some aspects of history, though I'll have to keep it short in the interest of time, such as Kurdish Rojava, federalism in Burma, the Panglong Conference, and its effects on Burmese interethnic relations. And I will also be using the New York Times Asia Pacific reports and the Council on Foreign Relations Global Conflict Tracker for current sources. So there's two primary claims. I'm going to be focusing mostly on the first one, which is that democratic confederalism is a potential solution for the ethnic, political, and cultural divisions in Myanmar. And that should these systems work successfully in Myanmar, they are highly likely to work for conflicted regions globally. So this is democratic confederalism. It is conceived by Abdullah Öcalan, who is currently in a Turkish prison right now. It's a left libertarian ideology, and it has a grassroots consensus-oriented approach to democracy compared to the top-down central government federal-based approach. It interestingly, although it's a very far-left ideology, it shares a lot of similarities with the original United States Articles of Confederation, and it's currently being practiced in the Democratic Autonomous Administration of Northern Syria, which is actually good for ideologies like this, because usually leftists like to make this very complex ideology and then never put it into practice, or if they do put it into practice, it's this horribly perverted mass murdering version of it. But this actually worked, and it uses direct democracy in order to resolve conflicts in a very conflicted part of the world, which from 2012 until now, it's still going strong, so there's a case for it. And this is an oversimplified overview of the Myanmar crisis. It has a population of about 56 million people. The vast majority are Bamar, about 70%, and the remainder of the minority groups are mostly around the mountainous frontier areas on the periphery. And there have been multiple attempts of democracy periodically, and they've always just been subverted by both the tyranny of the majority and then a bunch of internal chaos followed by the junta just coming in and seizing power. And this has happened multiple times. Once again, this is not the first time. This is the Panglong Agreement. It was signed between the Bamar, Shan, Chin, and Kachin representatives. It promised federal democracy and equitable treatment for all groups involved. And each individual representative group was allowed to leave the agreement after 10 years. but there were many inequalities with regards to the parliamentary representation of the minority groups because they represent a small minority, so they're going to be tyrannized by the majority, and it was completely disregarded after Ne Win overthrew the whole thing in the 1962 coup, which is an event, as you will see, is like cyclical. It continues. It happens many times. This is the first of the factions. It's the State Administration Council. It overthrew the democratically elected government of Myanmar in 2021. It's supported by the Russian Federation, which is the de facto enemy of the United States. It initiated ethnic cleansing on the Rohingya minority, as well as the brutal Four Cuts campaign, which involved cutting off food and supplies to civilian populations in minority areas. It claims to protect Buddhism, yet airstrikes Buddhist temples on a regular basis. And its armed forces are known as the Tatmadaw, which is like Royal Armed Forces, and the Pew Salti, which is like their militia groups that are kind of like their mercenaries. And this is their leader right there. He doesn't seem like a very jolly fellow. And yeah, these are, you can pretty much tell these are the bad guys. I mean, at least they care about stopping the spread of corona with their mask, but not very good in regards to this, which is they profit heavily from the cultivation of opium and the production of heroin and fentanyl, some of which makes it to the United States. So if you think this is just happening in some faraway land and you can just shut your eyes and be ignorant to it, I know people who have died from fentanyl. A lot of people know people who have died from fentanyl, likely sourced from the junta who is enslaving people and using them to farm it pretty much. There's also international crime syndicates like the Triads that have moved in, and they've started running scam centers where they like kidnap English-speaking people and force them to run those scams. If you get those scam texts on your phone a lot of them are coming from scam centers in Myanmar. So that's a pretty dark underbelly of the world. This is the National League for Democracy, the National Unity Government. They were started after the August 8th, 1988 uprising by Aung San Suu Kyi. They won 2 elections in 1990 and 2021. They were subverted by the military junta both times. And in response to this, the surviving elements that were not exiled or executed by the government, by the junta, formed the National Unity Government as the internationally recognized government in exile. And the NUG promises a federal democracy, but they're light on the specific details. This is something Jack pointed out, which was that they always say, oh yeah, we'll have an equitable democracy, but they don't give the exact numbers of the delegates that the minorities will get, which is kind of a problem for them, and it's why the minorities are very iffy on making alliances with them. And their armed wing is the People's Defense Forces de jure. I put de jure because a lot of their command structure is decentralized, so it's like hard to say. It's just on paper they command them, but their true command is like unknown. And these are like, so if those guys are the good guys, these guys are like the other guys. Like we don't really know anything about them. There's not a lot of English language sources besides what their info desk puts out. And so EAOs are basically ethnic minorities fighting for sovereignty on the frontiers of Myanmar's territory. The Arakan Army, or United League of Arakan, is the most powerful and effective one out of them. And they have almost full control of Rakhine State, which is a border region right here. They have almost full control of that. There's a Chinese pipeline going through it as well, so they have some diplomatic leverage there. And they have no interest in democracy. But they are willing to be part of a confederation and respect other people's boundaries and borders much more than the junta does. So that's an improvement. They're far from the only group. This is just a small amount of the different armed forces that are sometimes fighting each other, sometimes allied, and it's an ever-shifting web of alliances. And on the right there from Geopolitical Monitor, you can see a February 2025 map of what the different factions held, and that's probably already outdated because the civil war is ongoing, so it very well may be like a little bit different by now. And this is all to say that clearly centralized bureaucratic states have not been able to exert proper control or administration over Myanmar at all. And so you would need like a decentralized system in order to allow minorities to still express themselves while still maintaining some semblance of organizational structure. You can't just have complete chaos. And so I do think that Öcalan's democratic system is the best because for this specific situation as well as other chaotic situations, for the reason that he almost addressed this exact issue. And I'm going to pull up a quote right now. which is, so in regards to Öcalan's core unit of social organization, he says that the social actors, which are each for themselves federative units, are the germ cells of participative democracy. They can combine and associate into new groups and confederations according to the situation. Each of the political units involved in participative democracy is essentially democratic. So it is, in essence, a direct democracy where the power is at the local level or the village or community level, and there's an equilibrium of power as opposed to a monopoly of it. It should be obvious in Myanmar, of all places, that different people from different places, even within the same country, have radically diverging views, and unless these views compel them to violence, they should be free to maintain them without infringing on others. Due to this fact, Öcalan's ideas of a centralized democratic system of social organization may fare better than traditional conceptions of centralized federal democracy. History has shown that centralized economies rarely outperform free, decentralized ones in terms of efficiency. Could the same perhaps be true of governments? Öcalan was a radical leftist, no doubt, and I am anything but. And yet I think his ideas hold value because of how they appeal to me, someone who is not the target political demographic. And that is what you need in a new, innovative system of organization. You need dynamism and the ability to adapt to the divergent beliefs of different communities. If your system involves forcing other people to see your superior and enlightened ways, however enlightened those ways may be, it runs the risk of devolving into the exact situation we see in Myanmar and other conflict zones globally. So one counter-argument to this that Jack brought was that the democratic majority has a tendency to overwhelm the minorities and marginalize them, and this is true of federal democracies. And I think it is the reason for the repeated failure of federal democracy in Myanmar since the Panglong Treaty. But it is not true of confederal ones. I had to cut a lot of the deep dive into Rojava because of time constraints, but needless to say, it works. There's Assyrians, Kurds, and Arabs, and they're three different ethnicities. Some of them are atheists, some of them are Christian, some of them are Muslim. They manage to get along. And they're surrounded by ISIS and like the Turkish government on the northern border, constantly trying to like invade them with proxy forces. They manage to defend themselves against them. So there is hope for this. It's not just something that's only on paper and not in real life. Although these same pressures may apply at a smaller scale, at least it won't be like at a national level where millions of people are just getting oppressed. Maybe it'll be a minority within the village that has issues, but I mean, there's never going to be a completely perfect system. And I do think that this will mitigate the risks of large-scale conflicts. Another problem is that these guys don't care about democracy at all. The Arakan Army and several other ethnic armed organizations, they don't care about democracy, and they have all the guns and all the military training, so like, who are you to tell them that they can't? Fortunately, Öcalan also, his ideology was conceived in a very hostile environment, and so he says, whether nation-state, republic, or democracy, democratic confederalism is open for compromises concerning state or governmental traditions. It allows for equal coexistence. And this is basically just an acknowledgement of pragmatism, like, you're not existing in a fantasy candy land that exists exclusively within your imagination. You're existing in the real world. There's other people who don't think like you, who think all your ideas are horrible and they want the opposite of that. And you have to learn to contend with that. You have to either have the power to defend yourself against these tyrannical forces, and if you can't completely annihilate them, you have to strike a deal with them. That's what the entire Myanmar civil war, if we go back to this map, it's just been this has been going on and off for 70 years. If you look at when some of these groups were formed, 1949 up there. They've been fighting since 1949 on and off. And that's because one cannot overpower the other, so they have to make a deal. And it's been on and off. So they make deals, then a new guy comes in, he breaks the deal, and then the cycle repeats. How much time do I have?
1 minute.
Okay. So with these in mind, you can keep the you can use the principle of the equilibrium of force, which is that the size and direction of the forces acting on an object are exactly balanced. Then there's no net force acting on the object. This can also be applied in regards to political force, hence the Founding Fathers implementing the Second Amendment for that equilibrium as opposed to a monopoly on force from the centralized state. And peace between disparate communities can only be maintained through an equilibrium of force. That's if one side does not think it can just overpower the other and tyrannize them. And just shying away and saying, oh, we don't need to use force at all, that's just a recipe to be utterly annihilated and become relegated to the dustbin of history. So let's not do that, and let's try and work together for a more equitable and individualistic future. Thank you.